Why do we need to search now at this particular point in history? We're on the verge of taking our attitudes and influence into the heavens. We're about to disperse throughout the stars and come into contact with other life forms and their environments, their homes. We must have an understanding of what we are and why it is we exist, or we will repeat history, a history not only filled with hope, but with atrocities. How do we begin this search? We have many choices, since we have to begin somewhere, and since we are a visual creature, we may find it useful by beginning with a technique science has used successfully. We can build a basic model that begins just before the beginning of our universe and ends just after the end of our universe. Once we have built this model, what do? We test it. How do we test the model? We apply it to the past to see if it reinforces the ideas for which our ancestors were willing to spill their blood. We apply it to the present to see if it resolves our present-day social conflicts. We apply it to the future to check its capability to resolve future dilemmas we could possibly face. We verify it through examining how it stands up to what we have established as being key ideas applicable to our universe. And lastly, we apply it to what visionaries and prophets tell us we must do to avoid future trauma and bloodletting. What does this process have to do with the uniqueness of our travels? We are the only life form existing on Earth that has accumulated and built upon a wealth of knowledge gained through the spilling of rivers of blood over thousands and thousands of years. Now, we can finally start to put these pieces of the puzzle together, which will show us the answer to the question, why? Does this make us unique? Is there any other creature that would attempt to establish a universal philosophy, a Magna Carta, that would not only embrace themselves, but all life forms that exist within the distant boundary of the universe itself? There is no doubt that we are truly a unique species. We have earned the right to be proud of our history, as traumatic as it has been. Many have suffered in order to bring us to this point of understanding a universal philosophy. How can we allow all this bloodletting and suffering to be for naught? It is time to bring a closure to our past. It is time to examine our past in order to understand our future. It is time to examine our past in order to change the future. Once we build the model of a universal philosophy, how do we decide what items and ideas to test it against? It seems to be almost impossible to decide which items deserve the honor of acting as the first ideas against a universal philosophy will be tested. The wealth of knowledge located upon the seemingly endless shelves and infinite books within our libraries is overwhelming. Our beliefs, observations, and analyses seem to be unending. How shall we choose? We should choose based upon our beliefs, religions, observations, science, and logic, philosophy. How shall we pick from each in order to test our model? To be fair to each, to do our best to avoid conflict, we will pick 10 items from each category. How do we decide upon the items? One of the basic requirements for a universal understanding of what we are and why we exist is the requirement set up by Stephen Hawking. Hawking said a universal philosophy of what we must be understandable by all humans so we can logically discuss it. Therefore, we need to pick a source of information that represents basic ideas from the ideas of religion, science, and philosophy. Once we have picked the reference for each and the 10 items from each of these sources, what questions shall we ask in order to test the model? The questions have to be broad, yet very specific. The questions have to get to the heart of why we constructed the universal model in the first place. Won't this take a huge number of questions? We're limited in terms of space, so we will have no choice but to limit our questions. Since we picked 10 items from each area of influence, we may as well choose 10 questions to test the model. What ideas should the 10 questions address? They should address very basic ideas we have worked long and hard to develop over the course of our painful journey throughout history. We already have beacons in society that guide our actions. Why do we need a universal philosophy? The question becomes, do we want to reinforce our present beacons, or do we feel they are adequate for us as we step into the heavens? Are we okay with the idea of believing we are superior to others? Are we okay with our past generated by these beacons? Are we okay with repeating the history of pain and suffering we impose upon each other as fellow humans? If we are okay with our present behavior, then this must mean we are okay with the idea of repeating these same actions. This must mean we are okay with bringing superiority, subjugation, domination, and abuse to others throughout the heavens, because that is exactly what will happen if we do not modify our past and present beliefs. We will also bring our good points with us, but that is not the point. The point is, do we wish to also bring with us our negatives? Could this violence, conflict, suffering, intolerance, subjugation, and domination already exist in space? It may. But if it doesn't, would we want to be the species that introduces it and spreads it throughout the heavens? If it already exists in space, would we want to be the ones to accelerate it and add to the misery, pain? Or would we prefer to be the ones to bring to the heavens an impenetrable argument against such actions? Would we prefer to step into the heavens as peacemakers, as a new species entering the wonders of the heavens with a voice of hope? We have a choice. We can build a universal philosophy, a model of the total picture of what we are, what our universe is, and what lies beyond our universe, or we can ignore the idea. Whatever choice we make, we must understand we cannot avoid being responsible for our actions just because we ignored trying to understand what significance we play in the universe. By choosing not to build the model representing a causative force, or God, the universe, and ourselves, we will have to make a decision. We will have decided not to change, not to examine what it is we have been struggling to establish throughout history. Thus, we will continue as we are. We will repeat history by taking our past into the heavens themselves. We will spread our present behaviors to the very ends of the universe.